Welcome to this transmission from the edge. I'm Alicia Tischel, and we have arrived at the halfway point of this year, 2026. And we've just crossed through solstice, which I don't know about you, but for me was one of the biggest unweavings I've ever been through and really illuminated like, oh, I thought that was the basement. I thought I was there. And like there's a whole aspect of like opening up. It's like, oh wow, there's so much more ground to cover, to experience, and new terrain to be with, and the unweaving of the patterns. A lot of false self that I didn't even know was operating. And so it's been wild to move with no kind of identity that was directing it, and feeling this new moon starting to spark and reform, which is really in alignment with what this new moon is inviting. So we are back in the womb, we're back in the cradle, we're back at the place where the wound of self-worth was created. The wound of self-worth that said, "Oh, we can't hear you if you say it like that. We can't see you if you move like that. We can't accept that," right? That wound that contorted us in a way that seemed to say, not you, not that way. Don't do it like that. Don't be like that. Don't cry like that. Don't want like that. Don't whatever. And then the wound of self-worth that is formed so non-verbally within us, within those first years of life, and the way that we meet something that might have been innocuous, might have been quite traumatic, however it formed for each of us. The place that we took meaning, where we created meaning for ourselves, that was, if I'm going to be heard, if I'm going to be met, if I'm going to be seen, if I am going to belong, I must. To be heard, I have to do it this way. To be seen, I have to look this way. I have to not look this way. So what did we have to do to be heard? Did you scream louder? Did you go silent? Did you learn to match what was happening in other cadences and other rhythms? Did you learn to obscure your own frequency, your own vibrancy, and become some type of mirror for something else? All of these ways, and this is of course happening so seemingly organically, so in the body, so through our senses, it's so nonverbal, this wound of self-worth, where we began to question, do I belong? Am I worthy to be here? Am I worthy to have my needs met? Am I worthy to be held? Am I worthy to be seen? And of course, little children, little babies are not cognating anything around worth, but that's how it sits in us. And our entire identity, the entire life, we've been living out, we've been wrestling, we've been behavior modifying, we've been taking to therapy, we've married and divorced it, we've done all of these things. And so much of what that has been about is addressing what was created from the wound and not actually the essence underneath our wound. And this energy, this portal that we're in right now, which is going to be really the container for the next 6 months, but really 18 months. So we've got this 6-month window of really opening through this cradle phase, of descending back down to choice point, of coming into this place of what forms me and what will I unweave and reweave in my own cradle, in my own container of being, of self. And then how does that allow an identity that's closer to essence, that's closer to the fullness of me, that moves with more inhabitation of my soul, that my soul is more inhabited of this body, of this field, and more available for expression, for creation, for moving through. And this is a place where we would allow the Gospel of Thomas text that says, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. And so at this core wound place of our self-worth, and I'm using that term, and you can, of course, change it to other language. They want you to understand is there is this core wound. There's this early wound that holds a freeze pattern that has locked your essence up. And this place of self that needs to emerge is what is held within that wounding. And the power of this descent into that place of opening up Now, depending on how you're working, all of those types of things, you might not have the container, might not have the support to go that deeply into that place, that returning of origin point. And so other ways you might think of it is coming into other choice points that might be a little bit more accessible to you, a little bit more verbalized so that you can work with them in more of the mental plane. And thinking about points of your life where you were faced with a choice to choose the self, to choose what felt like impulse for you, what felt like truth, what felt like vitality, passion, knowing for you, or to choose what was expected, to choose what was demanded, to choose what was considered responsible, palatable, relatable, controllable, knowable from the idea of the false impositions of logic. So this idea of like, well, I could explain this and this. So for me, one of those choice points was at high school graduation and recognizing I did not want to go to college. I didn't know what I wanted to do or be. I needed space to explore and I wanted to see the world and I had zero support for that. And I was not a mature enough 18-year-old to sort of figure that out completely, especially in executive functioning on my own. But beyond that, what felt impossible to navigate was the level of pressure from teachers, from my parents especially. It was a no-go for them that I would not go to college. And this sort of expectation, this is just what you're doing. In everyone else's eyes, there was no discussion available. And so the only way I could engage with my own choice point was from fantasy. And so this fantasy of running off to Paris and this fantasy of going and living the world. And I wanted to just sleep on trains and just, to run away. And that was the only way that I could engage with it. I did not have enough self-container to hold the vision, the impulse that felt true, that was I needed space and time and exploration before I set myself forth on this path. Well, that wasn't possible. So the choice I made was the relatable one. The choice I made was the expected. The choice I made was the responsible one. And I went to school and 2 years of my life fapping about and changing my major every, 3 days and exploring. And so I did do the exploring. I did do the adventure. I did do what I was called to do. I just didn't do it from the most authentic place. I didn't do it from the truest place. And I did it in a collapse into this responsibility for others, this responsibility for making sure that my version of self and life could be understood by others. And so that was the place where I'm sacrificing my self-worth to choose false belonging, to choose relatability. And this is where we have to unwind that pattern. So it's not wrong that I went to college. I actually had a great time in many ways and made friends and all those things. And I did explore, right? I faffed about for 2 years. It was not till the end of college that I got really found a track and was able to focus and really land. And then that was a beautiful experience as well. But I needed those 2 years to just explore. But because it also came with the sacrifice of the truth, and it came through my continued expectation that I would not be supported as me, that to follow the impulse of self would require a lack of connection to other. It would require to step out of relationship. And this is a place where many of us have been again and again and again. And I think this is the leadership activation that we're in, because those of us who came with the codes for the next, for the new, for traveling in the dark here, for moving into the unknown in the ways that we're meant to, what we've most practiced though is either a compromise in that place of that choice, or where we've tried to, very much for me, straddle the line. So it's like a little bit of what I need and a little bit of what's expected, and trying to straddle that line and to keep some type of balance. And I've called that balance harmony. And the leadership activation here is to go back to these choice points and unravel. So for me, it's been actually meeting the grief of an 18-year-old who didn't feel grief at the time. I just felt kind of mad and irritated and, misunderstood and all those types of things. But what I'm able to do now is to grieve and to let her actually feel what it was to be unreflected and unsupported, to feel that place. Why this is so important? Because our next initiation, this huge initiation that I know so many of us are in this portal of the throat. And we've been dancing with this. And I know some people are like, when is it going to be done? We're just barely starting. We're just barely getting into this initiation. We're in another huge place, though, of opening. We're at the gate of Gene Key 62, the point of no return. This is the codon ring of the point of no return. And what that refers to, which is not the same as like this place is like where we're actually returning into the womb to come back to this place where the wound sits so that we can bring forth what is inside of it. The point of no return is this place where you actually began to experience your truth and you began to allow it to move through you. And you begin to recognize, I can't go back. I can't unsee what I've seen. I can't unknow what I've known. And this is the place where your leadership becomes trustworthy. So yes, it's messy. And yes, we're still figuring out the voice activation and all of the things that we have to practice around it. But what begins to shift the frequency that allows you to be trustworthy to yourself first, right? The first threshold of leadership is self. The second threshold is service. And that first threshold of becoming trustworthy with your own truth, to hold that frequency and allow yourself to meet it requires that we undo these places where we were not able to experience the truth of what we were going through. And we had to be the one who was wrong. We had to be the one who was too different. This is requiring us to meet these places where we've held our difference as an armoring. We've held this idea of I am the outlier, I am the psychedelic sheep, I am the black sheep, I am the outcast, I am the wrong one. I am wrong because I know these things. I am wrong because I cannot do it the way the world expects. I am wrong because I don't understand what the mainstream is accepting as okay, and that's not okay, and I don't understand. So I must be the weird one. I must be the wrong one. And then we've had two options. We either come into using the armoring as a way of being able to barrel our way through the distortion of the collective, or we collapse back in. And for a lot of us, we pivot and we position in different ways using both of those tools of sort of the armor and the, head down, and you go into kind of linebacker mode and you just got to barrel through with the determination that this is truth and I've got to get this out there. I've got to make you see, or I've got to be so angry that you don't see, as a way of protecting myself for the grief of humanity, of the just complete, utter breakdown of my own mind to not be able to understand why we can't see this and why we're not doing things differently. So much to hold. It's so much to hold. So of course, it's taken time to even grow up enough and to have enough of us ready to hold a different field. But we're getting there. We're getting there. And this is the beginning of really reseeding a web, a field of sacred leadership where we don't have to either barrel through or collapse. That there's a new coherence that we're being asked to move with and to allow to hold us and to allow to become a current that we can trust. And that first requires we go back to go forward. We go slow to then have the quantum leap. And this place of returning to these choice points, these places of returning to where we abandon self, these places where we return back to a cradle moment, a crossroad moment where we thought, maybe not consciously in a lot of these places, but I can't be myself. I'm not allowed. It's not going to work. It's not going to happen. That is so much what this energy is opening us to. So this isn't for me what I would say a traditional new moon energy where it's sort of like set a bunch of goals or, write a bunch of checks from the universe and declare all your stuff and move on. This is really, again, about a reseeding of resetting the ground, of coming so deep into foundation that we can't help but have new fruit grow from these seeds. And I think there's something that's so important about understanding, and I'm not going to stop talking about it, and we can all just be sick of me if we need to, but understanding that descent is such a necessary part of the process. The gift of Gene Key 62 is this precision. And, we tend to practice precision with thinking that it's like, well, I'm precise when I know the answer. I can be precise when I know the answer because I can just regurgitate. Regurgitation is not precision. Control is not precision. That requires collapse and denial and self-abandonment is not precision. And it's not harmony either. And so precision, if you think about striking the tuning fork. And there's a way that you can strike and it's precise, or there's a way you can strike that it's a little wobbly, watery. And so what has happened in our straddling the lines, in those places where we attempt to get what we need, but it comes with the sacrifice and the obligation upholding and the hiding of ourselves, even though we're trying to get the right message out. Many of us have built businesses, we've built worlds that hold an echo of the truth that we're here for, but have denied the self that would hold that truth, right? And so those are the places where we're not striking in precision. The frequency is not precise. It's not clear. Now, the way that we come into that precision is through the practice of speaking, living, holding, creating, understanding truth as frequency in our body. And that does not happen except when this throat chakra begins to be able to release fascially the tension, right? To unwind all of the holding, all of the suppression, all of the ways where we have held the difference too tightly, where we're suppressing or we're holding back all these places. And so many of us, to get to that precise strike is going to require a messy phase. It's going to require what looks completely like the opposite of precision. It's going to look like a little bit of chaos. It's going to look like a little bit of practicing towards what precision in striking truth, holding the frequency of truth would look like. As we have to be willing to say, as we come back, as we go back to go forward, as we're willing to say, okay, I have to come back to a choice point and I have to unwind myself into that choice point to be able to set forth a new path. So the choice point is the place where the wave would become particle. So it's where something begins to come into form, where the weaving, the initiatory point of the weaving. So when impulse would become initiation. So we can have all these impulses, we can have all this movement. So impulse is movement, the sparking, things are kind of moving. And this happens in the place of the fertile void, like things are just sparking. But what catches, what hooks, what sets forth the path is where the choice point is. And for most of our life, our choice points are preconscious, subconscious, unconscious, meaning that we're not engaged with that choice point from a full presence, from clarity. And so, one, we could just be like, well, that's wrong and we're bad and we're stupid humans because that's how we live. Or we could recognize that choice points are meant to be worked with over time and that the part of the human journey is not doing it all at once. And I think can be a place where even in our mindfulness trainings that we are maybe a little confused about what the power of presence really requires or how we're not living our lives in this linear fashion that we think. And so in the circularity and the cyclical aspect of self, that we return to these choice points again and again, and they are the awakening, they are the unfolding, they are the onion that continues to move. And so as we work with these choice points again and again to clarify, to refine, to become precise, so that as we circle around the next time on this cycle of self and we come back to this place of choice, we are able to integrate, we're able to move more with the wisdom. And so we use the clicks of the wheel as these places of returning to choice point. We use these energetic portals such as this beautiful new moon. So there's different ways that we can access a choice point, but it is a returning to a place where a pathway was set. And now once that pathway is set, it is a cycle or a spiral or a loop, if you will, that we follow until something opens and changes it. So sometimes we could think about that we are just chasing our own tails. We're just kind of cycling. You can feel that sometimes in the way that you're working with yourself, that you're like, well, I've been here before. And then other times you can feel that it's spiraling, where there's a way that there's a familiarity. I'm experiencing similar things, or I can see through the pattern. I can see through the script or through the external play of it into the patterning that I'm working with. But I also notice, the trigger is a bit different, or I'm able to stay more present. I can stay in my body longer, all of these things. So all of that is happening autonomically. That is the whole process of the selves, if we bring it across our soul timeline. What becomes powerful is when you become a co-creator in your cyclical nature. You become very conscious of working with that energy, of making aware choices, of bringing the presence to this. So that's what we're doing here. We're offering ourselves an opportunity to come to that place where the choice point of who do I have to be? How do I get heard? How do I get seen? What's allowed? what's allowed for my voice, what's allowed for my truth, what's allowed for my visibility, what's going to be reflected back to me. Can I be reflected back honestly, authentically? We feel this internal pressure to become the wisdom keepers that we're here to be. And yet we have not been reflected in that wisdom, in that genius, in that wounding, in that initiation, in any of those ways. One of the reasons we need to be coming together in community as sacred leaders is to do that witnessing for each other so that we can have that clear witnessing and reflection. And that creates a resonance. And then we can hold that as entrainment. But that for most of us did not happen as children. And we might have had it in a couple of ways. You might have had that reflection back where you were made very special. At places where certain gifts, certain aspects of my essence and my genius were made very special and were sort of pedestalized. And they became places that I either felt very great about myself, felt very special, very wonderful, or sort of felt like this, like, oh my God, I could never live up to this idea that people have about me. Like, I'm just me. I'm just this kid trying to, whatever it might be. So we had those. We also have places where we were not reflected at all. And we feel like, well, maybe I'm not that. Maybe that's not true. I thought that was me. I thought I had this gift, but nobody sees it. Nobody wants it. Nobody says it. So we'd have these two ways where we're so unclearly reflected, untruthfully witnessed as ourselves. If we just allow that to be part of the cycle of like, okay, where there's something about having to come back to recognize I need to be witnessed in myself. I have to create a space. I have to enter into a container, whether that's one person, a program, a mentorship. I have to come into a space where I can finally let down my guard and I can take the risk of bringing forth these parts of me so they can be held and witnessed and honored so that I can then begin to hold them more. And that is a process. And so all of this idea that you can do your work alone, it's right, it's your work. But if you are not in co-regulation, if you're not in co-witnessing, you're not going to be able to ever hold the voltage. It's really this back and forth of this play of like, well, can I show you this? And can I show you this? And then how do I learn to hold myself as I keep opening up to sharing and showing more? So the journey of visibility is an ongoing practice of becoming both that way of opening to that exposure, but also holding that level of exposure. And that's when vulnerability stops being a liability and becomes a superpower. There is so much happening energetically and just the massive amount of continual changes and tectonic plate shifting is just immense. And I'm just going to wrap it up here. I've said so many things. I'm not going to stop talking about these things. This is such a portal we're in. I'm going to be talking about it at least for the next 6 months, bringing these things forward. I'm also going to be opening some really important leadership containers starting next week with a free call, a community call on Magdalene Feast Day. What do we need to be recognizing as sacred leaders? What's this return, this reclamation that starts today with this new moon? But we will listen to the field that the Magdalene brings forward for us to notice what's necessary for this reclamation, this remembrance, this return to something within ourselves that needs to be brought forth. And then these new threshold moments where we can use these places of returning to this choice point, crossing the threshold again and again, allowing ourselves to live into the cyclicalness of ourselves and also bringing that into alignment to attune with the season. And there's so much energy work, the energy of our service, the energy of our leadership, this place of just really moving from more of our organic self and letting this come forward. So thank you for listening to this transmission ramble and riff on the energy. I hope you have a most beautiful new moon. I hope you get some time with the water today just to listen, to allow it to really nourish your own currents that are parched and that are feeling a little static, a little stagnant, a little maybe clogged up. And I am just offering such prayers for all of us to recognize this place, these leadership initiations, this place of moving through the dark night in new ways is so on brand for 2026. It's so on brand for Starseeds. It's just so necessary right now. So don't shame yourself for the confusion. Don't shame yourself for even if you're still throwing strategies at everything and looking for the answer, don't shame yourself for that. Just recognize there as an opportunity to realize that to create something new of self, of life, of leadership, of service, of world, that you get to risk into something new, a new way of creating, a new way of living, a new way of seeing, a new way of being received as yourself. And that's what we're here for. All right, take care. I'll talk to you later.